This episode of Q Point Podcast is pre-recorded, produced and sponsored by Karina Quirk, broker at Next Home Experience.
Different views.
I know your story.
From different Jews.
Incredible job.
He's David Quirk.
You brought it up.
And she's Karina Quirk.
Imagine.
This is
Q Point.
Thank you for joining us for part 2 with Maine Congressman Jared Golden.
What do you think about the EV rebates that are going to expire at the end of September?
I should be asking you that. I thought that the rebates were going to higher income levels than necessary, to be honest. But when I looked at the greater whole of the Inflation Reduction Act, there are other parts of the bill worth supporting. But I don't think really wealthy households need a subsidy to buy EV. We've already talked about my opposition to EV mandates in the past. I'm glad we're not dealing with that pressure anymore. And I'm going to guess that it's probably not great policy to take the rebates away outright. But I was pretty frustrated with the way the Biden administration handled this program, the way the bill was written. In my conversations with Joe Manchin, a guy that I had to say the closest thing, in politics you can call a friendship, someone I trusted and found to be very thoughtful and had a good team around him. They structured that bill so that it would encourage the onshoring of domestic electric vehicle manufacturing and also battery manufacturing facilities. And the White House under Biden pretty much found every loophole that they could argue with their lawyers against that and rush these things out the door. And that was not the intent of the bill. So I actually feel less bad as a result of how they chose to implement it, that we're now seeing the things go away. I think I joked to you, though, before we started that my current truck, which is gas operated, might be the last one that I have. And that's not like a personal choice. I got 80,000 miles on it. I hope to drive it for many years. And I think the market's probably moving in a different direction in the long run. I don't know if EV's even the end of the road or if it's just like some kind of bridge technology, but I don't think we're going to be dependent on gas operated vehicles forever. But I think we've talked about it and you agree, that should be a market decision, not a government mandate.
Recently, we had Brewer Police Chief Christopher Martin in here updating us on drug trafficking and cartels, and he even stated that there are kilo quantities of fentanyl, methamphetamine, and cocaine in the Bangor market. Law enforcement, they're dealing with cartel-linked fentanyl trafficking, illegal marijuana grows, an uptick crossing the border illegally, and dangerous incidents like the recent one in Rumford. Allegedly, there was an armed shootout chase where these suspects fired AR-15 style rifles at officers. The suspects allegedly were cartel gang members. Would you support additional federal funding to help local agencies respond to these threats?
Yes, I would support federal funds for that purpose. I already think they exist. I think the question is under what programming and who's the lead on it, what existing relationships are in place. So for many years, I can remember writing about, because I was working for Senator Collins, memos about supporting Operation Stone Garden, which was for border states to do border security operations to include drug interdiction operations. And you could use that up to 100 miles off the border, which in Maine meant you could get some pretty good reach with that program. And there was a lot of success through the years. I don't know what the status of that program is and whether or not it's still being utilized in Maine, but I've had enough conversations through the years with the state police or local law enforcement to know that there is a real threat out there in the state. In my hometown of Lewiston, look, I grew up in Leeds, Maine. It's just rural town, and Lewiston used to be like a big city in my mind. Now I understand it's only, 36,000 people, 18,000 across the river, give or take, in Auburn. And that's actually the biggest town in Maine's 2nd Congressional District. And I can remember being old enough to be aware that Lewiston was going through some rough times economically, drugs and crime. And then also, particularly when I was away in the Marines, feeling like things were turning a corner. And when I came home, that things were looking up. But I'd say over the last 10 years, it's actually been going backwards. And it became just kind of obvious to the naked eye that what was happening was a lot more drug dealing elements, setting up shop, showing a presence on the street. I've raised concerns with mayors in Lewiston about this, needing to be more aggressive about this issue, not to mention the homelessness issue, which is largely tied to drug addiction, and making sure that we don't have a permissive culture going on there. And it's no surprise to me that You go right up the Androscoggin River. It's a traditional transit relationship going on there. So I've heard from Rumford that whatever you see going on in Lewiston, it's probably making its way up to Rumford as well. And those types of relationships happen in other ways. So I don't know what that looks like for Bangor and where it emanates out of from here, but I know it's impacting a lot of communities around, not just Bangor itself. But I take it seriously. It's a big threat to our local police. They're not always equipped or trained or expecting to be dealing with very dangerous, sophisticated gang networks, which are heavily armed sometimes. And there's a lot of money to be made. So obviously they're going to push the package as well. So I think we need everything we can get to push back against that. In this Congress, I've actually co-sponsored legislation to really heighten penalties and even call for or allow for the death penalty in instances where we have people killing police officers and law enforcement. And it's going to be, in most instances, like some kind of cartel or gang network that's going to go there and target law enforcement or have the kind of firepower to get into these very dangerous fights that sometimes take place. So that's a part of why I supported that legislation, is because we've seen an uptick of cops being killed in the line of duty. And then I also have been on a cartel task force in the last Congress with Dan Crenshaw, who's a Republican from Texas, also of my generation, and he's from border communities down there. But we ended up putting out legislation together to allow for Congress to debate whether or not to authorize the use of military assets against the drug cartels, particularly in Mexico, to try and get them to change their mindset and their calculus about deciding to push all these drugs and gang networks up into the United States.
Well, what are your thoughts of the National Guard taking over D.C. to clean up crime there?
It's kind of a sticky issue. D.C. is in a very unique situation, different than many other cities, where they're not a state, they're not in a state, they are in a controlled status here. Congress has a lot of authority and sometimes the executive branch. I have seen the National Guard guarding the Capitol for weeks on end after January 6th in 2021, seen the nature of the relationship between the Guard, the city, and the Capitol Police as well. You've really got three entities at work there, and I've come to respect all three in their professionalism. They are used to working together, and I think that they will work well together. It's hard to argue that there isn't a fair amount of violent crime and drug crime and gang elements at work in DC, just like pretty much any major city in America or pretty much in the world. So there's always going to be a need to be vigilant and enforcing laws. I have a lot of confidence in the Metropolitan Police there, but I think they're happy to have the extra help and attention. What really matters, I think, is the process correct? Are the laws being followed? Is there a good partnership and relationship between the executive branch and the mayor's office, or between the Congress and the mayor's office? I think the mayor has raised some concerns about process and who's in control on a day-to-day operations basis, but I also don't hear her saying that she's objecting to the extra assets being put to use.
If you're just tuning in, this is Q Point Podcast. I'm Karina Quirk, co-hosting with my husband, David Quirk, and we are having a discussion with Maine Congressman Jared Golden.
So obviously you probably saw the video that was recorded out in front of your office. And I know you were telling us it's not an employee, it's not a constituent, but if for some reason your name is tagged all over it.
Yeah, I'm glad that the woman is okay and that things didn't get worse. I'm sure it's probably a relief to her and a lot of people in the community that the police seem to have got themselves a suspect. I don't know what the legal status is there, but hats off to the Bangor police for moving quick on that. No, that wasn't anyone from my staff or who had been in my office. And I think the camera is not from my office, I'm assuming. I actually hadn't been really briefed on it. I don't think my staff even witnessed it take place. I know Zach in my Bangor office, I would hope, not that I'm calling on him to put himself in harm's way, but I think he would have been either helping or calling the police if he had witnessed that. But that was caught on a camera that's like part of the building that we're in. So pretty shocking to see, but that's the type of stuff that we were just talking about as it relates to growing crime that is a result of drug addiction. And we know that that addiction is being fed by people who are trying to make money off of our people. And that's what a drug crime network is. And it brings other forms of crime along with it. Of course, I don't know if you know this. Someone from outside of Maine said something to me about how awesome the Bangor police website is. And I didn't know what they were talking about. And they were like, oh, yeah, it's become famous.
I bet they are referring to their Facebook page, which is quite popular.
They're very funny.
He is retired now, but Lieutenant Tim Cotton writes all of the posts, and he is a writer, and he adds humor to every post. So it grabs attention, which is good.
Yeah.
If you're just tuning in, this is Q Point Podcast. I'm Karina Quirk, co-hosting with my husband, David Quirk, and we are having a discussion with Maine Congressman Jared Golden.
So you're out on the campaign trail, and there was rumors about you running for governor. Was that true or not?
I don't think it's a secret that I was definitely thinking about it. And honestly, I've talked to several members of Congress, senators, who have been governors, and they all say that being governor is the best job in American politics, hands down. And I think that there's probably something to that. I think that the first thing that I would say is I'm 43 years old. I have a 1-year-old, a 4-year-old. I'm missing a lot of family time. That's increasingly part of the calculation, and like things that I'm thinking about on whether or not to keep serving. But boy, I was thinking Congress is pretty gridlocked, pretty dysfunctional. It can be very frustrating. And if I were governor, maybe I could just call the shots. But I've had a lot of conversations with people that were like, well, wait a minute, that is not always how it goes. There is a legislative body, which I know, having come from one, and that being governor can be really frustrating too. And at the end of the day, my thinking was that I've got some ideas about how I would run the state differently if I were governor, or how I would try to. And I think one could foresee that I might butt heads with the current direction. And maybe that's necessary. Maybe that's what we need, the change. But as I was thinking about that and the prospects of success, because I do think you have to be clear-eyed about it. I'm not trying to run some kind of vanity campaign just to heighten my name recognition or whatever it may be. If I do this, can I win? And then if I win, will I be successful in building a good team around me and being able to actually deal with the legislature? And I had a lot of questions about that. At the end of the day, I felt like the country would be well served. After this last election, we saw President Trump come into office. Again, we have a Republican-controlled Senate and House. I felt like the country would do well to have a check on that one-party rule. So a House majority for Democrats seems like a possibility. And I do still have some goals that are left unfinished in my work in Congress. Some of this conversation about lobstermen is chief among those. So I still have good energy and things I'm trying to get done, and I'm willing to sign up for another 2 years here. I do keep stressing to people that I don't think I'm going to keep doing this forever. And I thought coming home to Maine might be a good way to keep serving, but also have more time here in Maine and be with the family. But it's just as likely that I could get that through other means. Don't need to stay in politics forever. And actually, between the 4 years I gave to the country and the Marines, and then the 10 years now I've given to my time in the State House and in Congress, I've given an awful lot. And like I said, I appreciate the opportunity to represent people. It's hard for me to imagine what I might have done over the last 10 years where I could have made such a big impact on many different issues in people's lives here in Maine. But I think that there's like a limit to how far I'm going to take this thing. But right now, I feel like the best service I can give both the people of Maine 2nd District and the country is going to be to put myself out there for one more 2-year term.
How are you preparing for what's shaping up to be another tough contest in one of America's most competitive districts, which it always is, right?
In the Marines, we said work hard, play hard, and you hear a lot of sports analogies out there about preparation, but I've won 4 elections here, and they've all been tough. I've always had to outperform the top of the Democratic ticket in this district, and I've simultaneously outperformed the Democratic Party ticket below me. So there's something there, and I've always hesitated to be like my own political pundit. Like, people will ask me to opine about why I have succeeded. And I think sometimes the most honest answer is, I don't know, but I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing and being who I am. And it does come down to a choice for people. And so far, more than half of them have chosen me through 4 elections. And I'm just going to do the job, call the shots the way I see it. And this is an interesting campaign in that I'm quite well known at this point statewide, and so is Paula Page. And I think the contrasts speak for themselves in many different ways. he'll probably deny this, but there were things and times where we sat down and worked together when I was in the State House, and a lot of things that we'll disagree about too, and others that we actually have a history of working together on. So it'll be an interesting campaign, but I think people pretty much know who we are. And hey, the election feels still a long ways away for me. I don't know how it feels for people out there, but I prefer not to be in full-blown campaign mode all the time. Although in these tough seats, honestly, it can be a resources game, which is mind-blowing to me. This race saw $48 million in total spending in 2024. That used to be like an expensive Senate race. For that to be spent on a House seat in rural America with a pretty cheap media market is a sign of the times. And it's not a positive sign, but there's not much that can be done about that, short of changing some of the laws about how money can or can't be spent in politics. But I'm pretty tired of that, I can tell you. We all see all the ads. People get so sick of them, and yet it keeps pouring in and the ante keeps going up.
If you're just tuning in, this is Q Point Podcast. I'm Karina Quirk, co-hosting with my husband, David Quirk, and we are having a discussion with Maine Congressman Jared Golden.
Speaking of your campaign, if somebody does want to help out your campaign, what's the best way for them to do that?
I don't know the answer to that right off the top of my head. I'm bad at PR and marketing, but I think just Googling Jared Golden for Congress will get them there. They'll find like the NRCC fake page about me that, like me declaring allegiance to Lord knows who or whatever. I don't know if you've seen some of those things. It's ridiculous.
And this is why we started this podcast a year ago, because of all that misinformation. We said, you know what, we're going to be on both sides and let the candidate clean it up, because it's that 30-second
I don't go after people real hard, as you know. I'm not a flamethrower, but like at the same time, the media always tries to play me off against like the far left, Mom Donnie and all these people. And I just said, like, look, I'm not from New York City. I don't want to live in New York City, and it's not really my business. If you want to try and attach me to Mom Donnie, good luck. People here know that I'm not some kind of raging socialist.
So what you're saying is you would not support Mom Donnie?
Not my preferred candidate or mayor of any community I lived in. I do think that there is a bigger part to that story that people really aren't considering, which is when you run retreads, people who have been in politics for a long time and they go away and come back and they go away and they come back, and you just can't seem to get rid of them. Like sometimes I think what happens is you get someone like Mom Donnie squeezes through and surprises people. And I don't know why the powers that be in New York City politics decided to put Cuomo up again, but I think people spoke pretty strongly that they've had enough of him.
Let's talk about affordable housing. As you know, I serve on the Maine Association of Realtors Legislative Committee. We've visited you a time or two in D.C., as well as the entire delegation. Would you consider supporting More Homes on the Market Act, H.R. 1340, which would increase the capital gains exemption and incentivize more long-term owners to sell their homes?
I'd want to look at the details, but right now I can tell you I'm interested in supporting housing in any way that I can, either coming at it from the perspective of how to help take the existing stock and bring prices down, or make it so people can more easily afford getting in the door of that first home or a new home. But I'm also interested in reforms that will make it easier to build, as you know, and NEPA reform can be a part of that. But there's a lot of local and state regulations that need to be worked with as well. And I think that Maine needs to pay attention to that, getting the zoning aspects right. But definitely something I can promise you I'll look into. And if it's something we can support, we'll be back in touch.
It's my understanding Representative Pingree has now signed on to this bill.
Good to know.
There's two more, if you want to take a look at them. It's Housing Supply Framework Act, H.R. 2840, which would create a national strategy for boosting housing production by providing guidelines and best practices for state and local zoning frameworks, and would reduce regulatory barriers for housing development. And then another is Revitalizing Downtowns and Main Streets, H.R. 2410, and this would provide an investment credit for converting underused commercial properties into residential and mixed-use housing.
On the last one, I think that sounds promising. One thing I would say is that I hate that we often add incentives into the tax code and then never see them go away. But you could see how that would make a real splash maybe for a number of years and work and get a lot of money put into repurposing commercial spaces. I think Bangor could probably do that in some spots. And I certainly know that would be potentially helpful in downtown Lewiston. And then I say this with caution, because in a lot of instances, I actually think that the federal government needs to step back and let state and local government make more decisions about how to use taxpayer resources. But on the zoning issue, I have been open to considering that we might need to come in over the top and deal with what seems like a crazy mixed match of local regulations that can make housing really difficult. I might be willing to play ball there on a limited basis as well.
Maine Congressman Jared Golden, thank you so much for your time. We know it's limited and we do appreciate it very much.
Yes, thank you. And also thank you for serving.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to come on and be part of the show again.
You've been listening to Q Point.
Follow us at qpointpodcast.com or on your favorite streaming app.
This is where you can get the news from the people who make the news.
Make sure to join us next time.
We hope you tune in.
Q Point Podcast invites guests and candidates from all parties to join the conversation. The views, information, opinions, and comments expressed during this program do not necessarily represent those of the host, Q Point Podcast, associates, affiliates, and CQRE LLC.
We want to take a moment to thank our listeners. We just started the podcast about a year ago. We are edging toward 50 episodes. If you'd like to know in advance who our guests will be sure to follow us on Facebook or on X. We do keep it updated with our upcoming guest appearances. And if you have a topic of interest, absolutely reach out. We'd love to hear from you. We appreciate the support. Catch every episode at qpointpodcast.com or wherever you stream. Tune in and tell your friends.